if we forget the heart or the soul of things, the things that make us want to wake up in the morning, be like, yes, like another day of doing this stuff. Like if we don't have that, then we're falling into this crisis of meaning. But also we can't just follow the soul and be this like, woo woo, we're just going to float through the universe and have some fun, because there is no structure to bring this soul to life.
There are 7 billion people in the world. Not everyone's going to get this.
This is Gray Transforms. I am Travis Gray. Today we are transforming with Mia Rosenzweig. Oh, I should have asked you how to pronounce your last name. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Mia is a leadership consultant and consciousness coach who helps executives develop spiritual intelligence. Mia is on a mission to elevate leadership experience from competitive to co-creative, from self-serving to self-actualizing, and from transactional to transcendent. Mia, how do you pronounce your last name and how are you today?
My last name is called Rosenzweig, which means rose branch in German.
Oh, that's awesome. It means rose branch. Look, this right here.
Yes.
These are like old roses, they're like
love
old
that.
crumbling roses. And I love the Rosicrucians. Have you ever heard of that? Rosicrucians?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, like the order of the rose. So that last name, the rose branch, that's really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super delighted to be here today with you. I'm
Awesome.
looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. So prior to this conversation, we've been speaking about the value of spiritual pragmatism and the things that you're doing that is really bringing the practical aspects out of the field of transpersonal psychology. And what that right now is looking like for you is the transpersonal coaching, and that transpersonal coaching in leadership and business and giving people this spiritual intelligence. So how did you find the field of transpersonal psychology, and how did you get into this wave of practicality in the field to be a coach?
So I've always been fascinated by everything that is concerned with the meaning of our existence. Like literally, I started reading about it when I was 15, 16. I'm 26 now for reference. So it's been already a decade that I've been exploring these things. But properly, I have been digging into that since I started my master's degree with Aleph Trust. So I've been pursuing a master's of science in consciousness studies, spirituality, and transpersonal psychology, after actually having come from a more business-directed angle. So I work as a leadership consultant and executive coach and learning experience designer, meaning that I look into what and how leaders can learn and prepare themselves for the future of work. So basically, I've always been seeing myself a bit like a bridge builder, because I couldn't fully identify myself with the business world. It was just too rigid, too strict and constrained in their way of thinking and doing things. And it just didn't really feel authentic and expansive and in flow. So that's why I've been seeking the more, spiritual direction through my degree now. And I always believe that innovation happens when we combine things that have not been previously combined. Mingling together the business and the spiritual aspects of life has always been fascinating to me. And I'm convinced that there's great potential for mutual synergy in the future. And that's what I want to drive.
Yeah, I love the symbol of the bridge. And it's amazing how we're sort of like the third generation of transpersonal psychologists. As far as the way that I see it, I see that there was this father generation that began the field, and then there was this motherly generation that worked on the methods of the field. Very, very important to have rigorous methods if this is going to be a rigorous scientific field, to be really academic. And not just fluff, not just woo, but this actual practical, pragmatic aspects that usable, some utility in the field. And there is something very important about our third generation of carrying on the torch and being the bridge and really actualizing the potentials of this field of transpersonal psychology and doing this in coaching, in business, and applying that to like this user learning experience of leaders. I think that's really fascinating. That's really valuable, and that's really that's really the right way for the field to approach utility in the world. So it's really amazing that that you and I are in this on this wave. We are bridging this generation, because we were born in then the 90s, late 90s, early 90s, and then now that becomes like, that was a transitional decade of like the internet just came online, and we're living through all of these advancements, and then bringing in the integration of the East and the West, the science and the cosmology, the existential questions, the spiritual questions, to bring all of that together, integrate that, and learn from it, so that it can be utilized to up level our leadership and how we run businesses. What for you? What is spiritual intelligence? What does that mean in the context of business?
So spiritual intelligence is basically the ability to act upon higher meanings, values, and purposes. So I always like to think that spirituality itself is our search for meaning, the innate human desire to feel connected to something bigger than ourselves, which also is encapsulated in the word transpersonal, right? Going beyond the ego. And that experiential part of feeling connected to something that is beyond ourselves, to put that into practical application in our everyday lives, that is spiritual intelligence. It's the practical application, basically, of spiritual ideas in business, in relationships, in anything really, health, whatever you like to refer to it. Yes. So also, in other words, really, it could be referred to as acting more as your higher self rather than being driven by the ego. Yeah.
I love that. It reminds me of, I'm a big fan of mixed martial arts, of combat sports, and there's a lot of, like, I could go on a big long tangent about the value of this as a sport, and there's just this really beautiful way that movement of the human body is diverse and expressed in combat sports. But then there's this idea of fighting intelligence or fighter IQ, and that's like this person's ability in the moment, or in the work, in the sport, in the actual fight, in the actual event itself, to be able to utilize real combat skills. So the way that you're framing this spiritual intelligence, I'm seeing how that makes sense. It's like, can I take these spiritual values, these higher values, these higher ways of being, can I take those things and make real application of them into my workforce, into my business, so that it is nourishing and growing and developing in a way that is still aligned with those higher values?
Absolutely. I love that you brought this martial arts topic up, because in my research that I'm doing on the topic of how transpersonal coaches can help business leaders develop spiritual intelligence, one of my participants actually also referred to martial arts and said that spiritual intelligence is a little bit like practicing martial art, because if you master the martial arts, you're actually doing less moves with more impact, right? Like a master of whatever kung fu can knock you out with like 2 or 3 moves, and when you're not so good, you probably take 7 or 10. And it's the same thing with spiritual intelligence. Like in business, if we only use our rational mind in this complex VUCA world that we find ourselves in, we have to make a lot more moves because we only use one form of human intelligence. If we also integrate emotional intelligence, which was a trend over the last like couple of decades, then that is already better. But there's so many more intelligences. And I see spiritual intelligence as like the next evolutionary step between cultivating IQ and EQ. So it's referred to as SQ. And when we harness that, we actually become more effective and efficient, because not only it's more likely that we're making the right moves, we are also making them right in the way that we need to do less and actually have bigger impact if we follow more of our soul rather than just thinking with our ego thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes sense. So that word intelligence, you're equating that to its practicality of usage, like emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is like conflict resolution. It's like, can I communicate my emotions? Can I communicate my feelings? Can I have enough self-awareness to know what my emotions are, verbalize them, articulate them to others, or to especially those that I'm in conflict with, in a way that is going to result in a solution, in a resolution to the conflict that maybe one or two people are having with one another. Maybe can I resolve those things even within myself? That is speaking to that emotional intelligence. So I love that spiritual intelligence as a application to business. Where do you see that actually applied? Like, what do you have any kind of like examples in business where spiritual intelligence is applied?
I mean, especially in leadership, it's absolutely crucial, because if we think about leadership, it is about values, creating purpose, and fostering meaning for employees and for the entire organization, and ideally even beyond, to contribute to society and like bigger goals, like trans-organizational, if you want, not only transpersonal, but really taking a more holistic approach. So that's why I would say spiritual intelligence is particularly important for leaders who need to work with values and actually like embody them, for when it comes to personal values, but obviously also organizational values, and really bringing them to life in their everyday behavior, rather than just putting them on a nice little poster somewhere and saying, this is our value statement, and now we're just going to forget about it and just have it hanging somewhere. It's about really the embodiment part of it. And once again, like, we're finding ourselves a little bit in a global crisis of meaning, whether that's on a personal level through COVID. A lot of people were literally like forced to reconsider the way how they were living and working. That was actually pretty positive for a lot of organizations, because they really radically had to rethink how to do things. And based on the constant innovation that we're facing, it is pretty overwhelming, not only for us individuals, but especially for leaders in big companies, because there's constant adaptation that needs to take place. You have to be very flexible these days. And if we harness more than one intelligence, and especially that bigger picture thinking that spiritual intelligence provides, we're just much more likely to, be one of those who are the survival of the fittest, one of those that can actually adapt. Because for me personally, my definition of spiritual intelligence is about cultivating broader perspectives, which is more of the IQ part, then deepening your connection to yourself, to others, to the beyond, really, which is the EQ part, the more felt emotional sense, through an elevated state of being. And that's the missing part that we're still working on, for example, through practices like meditation, through psychedelics, through other ways of transcending, going beyond the ego, to really get into that altered/higher state that allows you to have this bigger way of thinking and this deeper way of feeling.
Yeah. Having this more comprehensive awareness, this comprehensive consciousness of the whole. Really deep to speak on a global crisis of meaning. That's deep, and to have this this more comprehensive consciousness, this awareness of a higher values. It's like, can we, the holistic aspect of that is a really great way to define and articulate what is really going on here. So now, if I'm a leader in a group or in a business, if I'm leading a business, if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm leading my own organization, how can I think about the quality of lives of everyone involved in making these different decisions? How can I think about that in a way that is experienced as valuable as well. Transpersonal psychology has been an experiential field. It's a field of experiencing these higher states of transpersonal experience, but then also how can I develop the tools and skills of inquiry into myself and into the team, maybe encourage the inquiry of each person within themselves so that we can become an ever increasingly integrated whole for the good of everyone's lives involved. It's like it's interesting. I'm kind of having these thoughts about like when you're running a business, you're owning a business. I think that it is so much more beautiful when you are working with other people that are also their own business. Like say I'm creating this technological empire of some sort. I've created this new AI platform, but I need a marketing person. Is it better for me to hire this marketing person, or is it better for me to hire somebody that I know that is running a marketing organization as well? And so then that becomes this integrated, weaved in thing that is it's higher and higher. It's wider. It's more expansive. It is doing more service for the good of everyone involved. Just some of those thoughts, but that's really amazing. So, have you worked with businesses and applied some of these things already? Do you already are doing this?
Partly. I mean, a lot of businesses are simply not ready yet. That is because a lot of individuals are not ready yet. I'd like to think that spiritual intelligence is still a very young concept. It's only been around for like 20 years. And I'm working with early adopters of this kind of new consciousness, I would say. And as soon as, the early adopter principle, which says around like 10 to 15% of people have to be curious and engage in it, and then it becomes mainstream. I think we're about to hit that tipping point over the next, maybe 5 to 10 years, that it will really become mainstream, which is already, becoming more visible with big trends like mindfulness and more health related, like physical initiatives that are implemented in organizations. Mental health is not just a nice to have these days anymore. It's an essential initiative that a lot of organizations provide for their employees. And I do believe that it will be the natural next step to implement more of meditative practices and other ways how we can go beyond the ego. There's so many different ways of how transpersonal coaches can do that. And depending on their background, everyone has a little bit of their own way, as I found through my research. There's no one size fits all solution. But really, I'm using the findings from my thesis to kind of create a toolkit for myself as well as for other transpersonal coaches of how we can help those business leaders get there. So as I'm still in the process of doing that, I'm experimenting with applying these concepts in my own work here and there. But we shall see what happens over the next few months as I'm finalizing the thesis. And then I shall use that as a basis for really honing my craft and using that as a guideline for my work. Yeah.
Yeah, you're creating framework, and I have heard other really intelligent, really beautifully brilliant scholars in this field speak about the value, the importance of frameworks, and it's not going to be one size fits all thing, but it's going to be the more frameworks are applied, the more that you can dive in and gain some benefit from those. It's really fascinating. I had recently a conversation with his name is Scott Shute, and he recently has been the director of mindfulness at LinkedIn. So LinkedIn actually has this really great company culture that does focus on mindfulness. I've had the opportunity to facilitate meditations for LinkedIn employees over Zoom. And so it's incredible that some of the bigger organizations, they are, attempting to do things like this. I'm in the heart of Silicon Valley. So I live in San Jose, California. There's all of this big business happening around me. Apple, Google, these things, they do have some great initiatives in their company culture. They have some of these things. I don't know how much mindfulness and things that do they actually have. But in our conversation with Scott Shute, we talked about the full body. Yes, so he has like another framework, but having multiple frameworks is so important. And for our age range, like the importance that I was just speaking about for our third generation kind of leading the way, it's so valuable for us to take frameworks and apply those to the next generation of leaders in business. And just as we become in more and more control and influential and impactful for the way that the global economy and life as human beings on this world, moves forward. So it's great that the sorts of things that you're creating is helping move humanity forward in this practical business way. So are you involved in you're right before this, you were we had been speaking about neurodermatitis. So that was the word we were speaking about in maybe an organization that you're working for or with. And so are you involved in like co-leading some of the aspects of that business or of those teams to create some study, some experimental thesis around your thesis, some application of this framework that you're creating?
Just to touch on what you also said around like the eczema piece that's like my newest adventure that I've been embarking on. I like to do a lot of different things because, again, I see a lot of cross-pollination between, the combination of different disciplines, a little bit like the philosophy from Leonardo da Vinci, which is called diversity of thought. And I really like to practice that because if you go down more, into like the health space, then you suddenly see how that connects to business. And then when you look at business, then you see how this connects to spirituality, and spirituality connects you to love and relationships. And it's all kind of like intermingled. But yeah, I started working for this startup that is concerned with helping people heal from psychosomatic conditions, primarily skin conditions at the moment, but also down the line, IBS, like chronic pain, fibromyalgia, and all of those conditions that people increasingly suffer from, actually, according to studies. Because that's my hypothesis, the mental health epidemic that we're facing, a lot of people are depressed these days because of heavy stress, burnout, the lack of meaning, which really is so related to depression. Which is why I said in the first place, like, I believe that we're facing a deep spiritual crisis at the moment, because, science has really replaced a lot of like religion and belief and all of that. And it's very rigid and constrained and all of these things. But anyway, all of this like mental suffering that we're facing also creates a lot of physical suffering. And the reason why I've also ventured down that road is because that really impacted myself. I've been suffering from eczema for maybe 5 to 6 years. So I didn't have that my whole life. And over the last 5 to 6 years, I have been, going through episodes where I was really depressed. And I've changed my diet so many times. I've literally tried everything. I've tried acupuncture to handle my stress levels and this and that. And also to really take more of the physical approach that a lot of people try to, follow when healing physically. But it's, again, this isolated approach, Same in business. If we only use the mind in order to fix the problems that we created with the mind, we cannot do that. As Albert Einstein reminds us, we have to go beyond that in order to fix those problems that we created with a certain way of thinking. It's the same for the body. You can't fix the body just by looking at the body, because the body and the mind are so intimately connected, right? So in order to really heal holistically, whether it's our bodies or our systems, our organizations, I believe that we have to take a more holistic approach. And this is also how I healed myself from eczema by, yes, of course, working with my body and physical healing, but primarily working on my mental health and my stress levels. And spirituality has been a very big part of that. So, for example, I've been looking for meaning in my disease. Like, why do I have that? Asking for the purpose, and also surrender is actually a really big and powerful word. And really like letting go of control, not trying to fix everything myself, and really saying, okay, there's certain things I just have no clue about. I don't understand them, and I can also somehow not control them, and really handing over the power from myself to something greater, whether you want to call that the universe or God or life. It doesn't really matter. For me, these are all just labels, and people can choose whatever label they want. I think in the end of the day, we're all referring to the same thing, something that is beyond ourselves. And yeah, because of the profound impact it had on the way how I was dealing with health challenges, but also with business challenges, with personal challenges, relationship challenges, I just personally see so much value in spirituality and its practical application to whatever issues it is that we're facing, and not just sitting there and meditating, because that's not going to lead us to world peace or health. It can help, but it also requires our action. So it's always about balance, in my opinion.
Yeah, meditation can be very insightful, but if we do nothing with those insights, then nothing happens from that. So I love how this, we fell into this, like, mirroring this metaphorical aspect, like using the body, the physical body. So prior to our conversation, we were speaking about neurodermatitis. And so I had never known eczema to be a psychological, anything psychological, only physical. I've only heard people speak about any kind of skin issues from the physical aspect because it's happening on your skin. But I know from personal experience that my psychological ups and downs have had an effect on the levels of inflammation in my body. And so that has affected my skin, and has your skin is your biggest organ. Some people aren't even aware of that this is the biggest organ of your body, is your skin. And so it's just natural that is going to be affected by your psychological well-being. And so that psychosomatic approach to your body, I have continued to think about business as an entity. I think that there's a lot of speaking about the shadow aspects of the unconscious. We think of like the unconscious things that we're hurting others, but we don't see that is like this unconscious shadow of ourselves that is affecting others in negative ways. But we also, there's also unconscious wisdom too. And I think that in the design of society as we understand it today, modern society and business organization and stuff, especially in America, as far as I understand how business is created here, it seems that even like language and the ways that businesses are built, there is an unconscious wisdom that this is an entity. You create an LLC so that it is a separate entity of yourself. So this is even taxed as its own thing. It's not taxed as me. It's like I've created this new person, and I'm birthing these ideas into existence through my business. And so, can you take a psychosomatic approach to your business? Can you enter your business thinking about, well, there are some physical, tangible aspects, things that need to be worked on, some different systems that need to be put into place. But then, what is the psychology behind doing those things? Why are we actually? Are we thinking in a way that is aligned with our higher values that we've also, spent some time really defining? Maybe a lot of businesses are growing and haven't even thought about what they were going to put on that sign that they were just going to forget about anyway. So they didn't even think about the sign at all. And then another level is that people thought about the sign, but that they didn't stay in alignment to the values on that sign. And so yeah, you can take this, you can call it psychosomatic. I mean, when I counsel people in my intake forms, the most like mainstream way to describe the kind of work that I do is biopsychosocial. So it's like taking this biopsychosocial approach to the business. It's like the social aspect is like, how are the people interacting with each other? How are we masterminding these things? And then the biological aspect, how is the physical thing, or like it, are we crowded? Are we crowded? Do we need more space here? Are we moving through the space in a way that we need? Maybe that even happens in this age as it becomes more and more digitized and AI. Are our systems of communication with one another as we're in different places in the world, does that need more room? Does that need more space? Is it lubricated enough? Are we getting through there? And then are all of these things tied into our soul, to our spirit, to our values as an organization, what we want our products and services to speak to our customers, and and then continue to taking care of our most valuable resources, those employees. So it is great work that you're doing to build these frameworks.
Can I just add one thought that just came to my mind when you were creating this amazing connection between the body and like organizations as organisms, which I completely agree with. They are separate organisms with their own set of values and their own culture. And no matter what's written on the wall, that can be very incongruent with how that organism actually functions, independently of individual leaders. It's like, the hen and the egg. I always have a bit of a challenge when people say, oh, I want to transform my company culture. I'm like, well, yes, we can do more collective initiatives to transform the culture, but the collective is also made up out of individuals. So actually, when everyone says, yes, we want to change, but I don't want to change, well, then nothing's going to happen, and actually relating to, another form of intelligence, really, which is somatic intelligence. We haven't touched on that yet, but that is, the whole wisdom of the body. That is an extremely intelligent system. I don't have to think about my heart beating right now. Like, it does that on its own. And all of our billions of cells are, just designed to keep us healthy. And I would like to think that people in an organization are all there because they have an interest for the organization to survive. So, I do think that there's a lot of parallels now that you've brought that analogy up, from how I actually managed to heal my body through the power of my mind. That is kind of, yes, in control of the rest, but also my body can very much influence my mind, through the nutrition that I put into my body. If it's not good for my gut, it's going to give me brain fog and all of these things. So it's always a two-way street, whether it comes to an individual organism like our bodies or an individual organism like one organization. Like, we have to work not just on either side, whether it's with the individual or the collective. We have to approach this from a both and kind of point of view.
Yeah,
yes.
Both and. That microcosm is always influencing the macrocosm.
Exactly. It's like transcending and including, like going to the next level, but not leaving one level out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, continuing with this, how do you're involved in a lot of things. How do you organize yourself? I really believe that each individual is a bit, I sort of even kind of spoke to that before, which was like, I would rather be an organization that is working with my buddy who has an organization. I want my people to have organizations as well, so that we can organize the bigger goals and things together. So each individual is an entity of themselves. Like, if I had a way for so many organizations, most organizations in the world, maybe they're very successful, but maybe a lot of them are having challenges with paying their employees above minimum wage. Maybe the business is not able to give them those kind of resources. But if they were able to develop their employees to have the sort of intelligence to also be resourceful and abundant in their own lives for the good of the business, then it's just another passive, or maybe not even passive, but another source of income, and another resource that comes into their lives, instead of being stuck at like, oh, I've hit the ceiling of what my company can afford to pay me, and now I can't go anywhere. I don't believe in that. I don't want to be the reason somebody is hitting some sort of ceiling in their lives. So it's really interesting. But so when you look at yourself as an entity, as an organization, how are you so able, like that Leonardo da Vinci, this diverse intelligences, how are you able to move through those things effectively?
So basically how I'm harnessing these intelligences in my own life.
Yeah, and how do you not get lost in the brain fog, or get lost in the tiring out, or how are you setting up effective systems to do all of these things?
One thing that I'd like to speak about in terms of setting up effective systems is actually a thought that has come up as I was listening to you, which is the whole idea around intrapreneurship, for example, which is really equipping individuals in an organization to become like mini entrepreneurs, and giving them greater freedom, and leaders basically stopping to treat employees like children who have no fucking clue what they're doing, and they have to be micromanaged and all of these things. Like, no, these are sovereign individuals that can very well handle things on their own. And that really requires, first of all, a mindset shift within the leader, or within myself, if I am to interact with other people and work together and effectively collaborate, to, really trust people that they want to do good work, create transparency, and empower them, give them the resources that they need, whether it's time, money, information, in order to do their best work. And that will also really then free myself as a leader up in order to do my best work, and not having to worry about, that someone does their work. So it's really about building individuals up to become more sovereign, independent, and empowered individuals, so that the organization can move beyond, financial ceilings that they have hit, because people become much more effective in what they're doing. They become more efficient because, you're harnessing the individual resources so much better, that obviously there will be more abundance coming out of that. So that is, I think, the big mindset change that we're going through right now when we're talking about the whole topic of the future of work. It's really that perspective change from, it's called actually theory X and theory Y, in terms of how we see people. Theory X is like, okay, people just come to work, they want to rip us off, they actually don't really care about being here, and they have to be like supervised, because otherwise they're just going to chill on their phones all day. Whereas theory Y says, no, people actually, if they have a purpose, and that comes back to the whole, spiritual intelligence stuff. If I have a strong purpose, if I have values, if I have meaning, and I see, why I'm doing the things that I'm doing on a daily basis, I am so much more motivated to actually show up and do my best work, because I genuinely care about what I'm doing here. I see how this fits into the bigger picture of life. And that is not to say that money doesn't play a role. Like, that is a pretty basic in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, need of safety, which comes first. And I can do the best work, but if I'm not getting paid and I can't, pay my bills, then that's an issue. So again, it's balance, right? But because we're living in such a wealthy day and age where a lot of people have those basic needs satisfied, it becomes more and more important for organizations to supply those initiatives that satisfy higher levels of development and self-actualization, which really comes to purpose, and why am I here, and who am I, and answering all of these questions and tending to that, because we're finding ourselves in the time of war of talent too. It's not that organizations can really choose who they want as their workforce. Like, the power comes more to us and our generation, like Gen Z and the millennials, who can choose who they want to work for. And yes, I'm going to go somewhere where I'm paid well, and I also want to do something where I see value. It's not about someone paying me well and I have to, I don't know, produce toilet paper. That is also important, as we've seen during COVID, but it wouldn't personally provide me with that sense of fulfillment that I am seeking for. And everyone has their own, things that make sense to them. But then also equipping people to find out what that really is. I am still in an ongoing search for what it is that provides me the greatest meaning. And I do believe that not everyone has their one purpose that they need to follow for the rest of their lives. Like we are ever evolving creatures. And I do think that our purposes can and should really change with us over time. So it's important to teach people how to check in with themselves, how to develop this spiritual intelligence so that they don't ideally need a coach all the time, but the coach helps them to empower themselves to check in with themselves and find out what they need, whether it's emotionally, spiritually, physically, that we stop being so reliant on looking outward for the answers and learn to tune more inward. And that is not to say that the internet isn't great, because I love Googling things and finding out stuff. But again, we have simply forgot the vast wisdom that you spoke about that is stored within our bodies, within our souls, within us, really, in terms of intuition, for example, or just like other ways of knowing that can provide huge benefit in decision-making in complex times, even though I can't rationally justify from my own experience why I'm sometimes not feeling like going to an event or not, taking that flight, or I really feel drawn to like connecting with this person because there's just something around them and I can't really understand what it is. But usually this leads to unexpectedly great outcomes. Why don't we do that in business? That's always what I'm wondering. I do that all the time in my personal life, and I try to apply that in my professional life. And when I do, I'm usually always pleasantly surprised. And that's what I try to communicate to business leaders too. Like, why don't you do the things that you do in your personal life that are working in business? Well, because it's scary, and because we're so trained to always having to have graphs and analytics and this and that to justify all of our decisions. But again, we're living in a complex world. So not everything is manageable with data alone. And technology is a tool. I think that's what I want to wrap this ramble up with. Like, yes, technology is great, but this is really where digital ethics come into place. What are we using that technology for? Is that good, or is that not good? Just because we can, should we do that? I don't know. Let's put a question mark, So whether that comes to ChatGPT and that whole evolution, or the whole debate around art and Midjourney and, user rights and all of these things, great that we can create great art, but there's always another side to consider. And that's where mainly, our spirit may guide us, our heart and our intuition of whether that feels right or not so right.
Yeah. I really love that you went into, I don't think it was a ramble at all. I think you're speaking on really great terms, really great, just articulating these things in a masterful way. So you're great job, Mia. Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you brought up Abraham Maslow. So for those that don't know, and I'm sure you do, Abraham Maslow, one of the founders of transpersonal psychology, at the end of his life, he was at the peak of his career. He had heart attacks and then passed away. He was like president of the APA. He was doing all these great things. Mostly people know him in like a psychology 101 course. You will hear what Mia just brought up, which was the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And at the foundation is just like simple things like food and shelter. And then it moves up to like your relationships and financials and self-esteem, and then self-actualization at the top. And Abraham Maslow is such a fascinating scholar. He was interested in business management. He was interested in some of these things, but then also the individual. So I think the things that we are talking about, Abraham Maslow is rolling around in his grave, like just so appreciative that we're having.
Yeah, guys, you're doing
like well. That. Yeah, got you, dog. Yeah, exactly. Got you, brother. So we're speaking about really great things, and you brought up I think I've vaguely heard about this, but I haven't read about it in any kind of extensive way, except for in an Abraham Maslow article about theory Z. So, so you mentioned theory X and theory Y, and I guess how I'm seeing this, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the theory X is this masculine thing, and then theory, yeah, no, I have to be wrong, right? X's and Y's. I guess I was sort of thinking about chromosomes and trying to make this connection. But so theory X, what you just said is this very hierarchical way of working with your employees, working within your business. It's sort of like the same structure of in academics, in education, of this lecture hall thing, like this one teacher speaking to these students rather than this collective, cohesive thing. And then the theory Y, a little bit more of that. Well, Abraham Maslow wrote about theory Z, and I think that is where this spiritual intelligence is being brought in. And so it's really beautiful. You articulated that so well. So how are you applying these things? That I think of the actualization of the individual as the most impactful, influential way to actualize the whole. So if I am looking to be a leader in my family or in my business, I must be a leader in my own life. If I'm looking to actualize this organization or birth this really beautiful entrepreneurial idea, and I love what you were saying about the intrapreneur, the entrepreneur, like that to have that inside of your business, that each of these are entrepreneurs in and of themselves, sovereign beings, and that maybe that theory Y, and then that theory Z is like how can we like integrate all of those things? So how are you as an individual applying these things in your own life? What is your spiritual practice like? What is your organizational practice like to accomplish these things?
So I would say in general, we are, as you already touched on, in a very masculine way of doing things, whether that's in business or in life in general. It's all about, organizing and like thinking rationally and doing all of these things. And with a shift towards the future of work, as you beautifully put, it is an reintegration of the feminine principle, which is much more about like the emotion, the collaboration, nurturing, intuition, creativity, all these things that are not better. We need both, but they've been lacking, and so there's a reintegration of that taking place. And I'm trying to do the same in my own life. I'm running my business. I have to be in a lot of masculine energy every day in order to kind of make it through here. But I do notice, especially as a woman in business, that I get easily depleted of that, because not to say that every woman has a feminine essence, it's like energetic qualities, and we all hold masculine and feminine energetics within us. But most women do have a more feminine core. And I would count myself in that category. So for me, it's really important to make time for relationships, for play, for creativity, because these are things that are really filling up my cup. And I notice that when I have to do a lot of admin work, I just get super easily depleted. And for example, for me in my career so far, it's been absolutely essential who I'm working with, because relationships and nurturing and connection, all these feminine desires are very important. So I'm making sure that, for example, who I'm working with in terms of clients, that I have a connection to them. I like these people, I don't just do that because it makes sense, because I'm going to earn money here, yes, of course, also. And I want to work with people who I really feel connected to, because that fills my cup. Or sometimes, I say to myself, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do these 5 things that are on my to-do list. But then in the morning, I check in with myself and actually see, how do I feel? Not just what do I think I need to do today, but how do I actually feel? Do I have energy for these things? Does that enrich me? And not every day I have the luxury to just go with the flow and go with my emotions, which are, again, the more feminine, and the masculine is the mind. But it gives me more productivity when I actually have the chance to go with that flow, because I can channel the energy that I have that day into the tasks that I'm most excited about. So I'm able to complete them in shorter time and with greater outputs usually if I follow that energy. So I check in with myself in the morning, for example. Apart from that, I do meditate every day. That has been a practice that I've been doing for years, and it just greatly benefits someone who is definitely an overthinker and someone who works a lot with the mind, which we all do in today's society. Again, it's the masculine factor that is still dominating. It's so important to also say, look, thank you, dear mind, you're doing a great job, but now is not your time, you know? So really like learning to control that amazing device that we have inside our heads, but also putting it into the place to access other, intelligences that we spoke about today. For example, spiritual intelligence, or somatic intelligence. When I notice that my eczema is like kind of flaring up again, I meditate and I really try to just sense into my body to develop an awareness. How does it feel when it itches? And funnily enough, it usually fades away, that feeling, if I just give space to it. And most of those practices sound so simple, and they are, but they're not easy. And that is what a lot of, what I noticed, that a lot of business people are kind of getting skeptical, because it sounds really simple and not that impactful. But my dad always used to say, simple is the hardest part. If you think about creating an amazing pitch, a pitch is like 1 or 2 lines or like a minute or something. That takes a lot of crafting, to really get this right. So it looks very simple in the end, and that is amazing, but the whole way of getting there is not so easy. So when people are considering working with a transpersonal coach, for example, or engaging in more of those practices themselves, don't underestimate the power that they hold simply because they look simple. So they do make a big difference. Those are just some examples.
To hone it, to make it concise is difficult. It is a challenge to make that concise. You're right. The feminine is not better by itself. The masculine is not better by itself. But the masculine without the feminine is worse than the feminine integrated with the masculine. If it's all masculine and it is lacking the feminine, then it is worse off than if both of those qualities are integrated into a cohesive whole. And so much of current dominating patriarchal, whatever words you want to use to describe that, is very hierarchical. It's very masculine driven. And so then it becomes very mind driven. It becomes very heady, and you forget about the majority of the body, which is, the rest, the limbs, and you forget about you forget about the arms and legs of the business, which is, your most important resource, the employees, things like this.
Especially the heart, because, business naturally requires a lot of structure and analytics in order to function. But if we forget the heart or the soul of things, the things that make us want to wake up in the morning, be like, yes, like another day of doing this stuff. Like if we don't have that, then we're falling into this crisis of meaning. But also, we can't just follow the soul and be this like, woo, woo, we're just going to float through the universe and have some fun, because there is no structure to bring this soul to life. Yeah.
It requires a structure to be actualized, to
Exactly.
emerge into the world. To be birthed into the world requires this structural component. I just want to say that artificial intelligence will always be artificial intelligence. Human intelligence will always be human intelligence. They will never be the same thing. Whether one is better or worse than another is a value judgment. It's a subjective value judgment based on maybe like things like speed, like AI, it's very fast. I can get a lot done very quickly with ChatGPT and things like this. If that is not including the human intelligence, that is still the same problem of focusing on the masculinity, the masculine value judgments, and just the masculine approval of what is effective and what is doing good things in the world, without the human intelligence to also frame this, it loses the soul, and like very, very clearly it loses the soul if there's no human intelligence involved. And you'll see people like falling into that trap also. They'll sort of like not use, maybe they're using AIs or chat GPTs or whatever. They're using these things in a way that seems like, oh, well, anybody could have done that. Well, yeah, anybody could have done that because you didn't integrate yourself into it. You didn't give it flavor. You didn't give it your own unique both and. You didn't bring it together into this so that it can birth and emerge something actually beautiful, actually soulful. You have a brilliance that is going to be so influential in the world of business that I can't wait to see all of that come into fruition.
Thank you, Travis. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So where can people connect with you? Where should people go to follow more of what you're doing and giving to the world?
Yes. So mainly I'm sharing all of my crazy thoughts and ideas on LinkedIn. So that's usually the best way to find me and also to connect with me, but also on my website, which is miarosenzweig.com. My last name is a little bit difficult to spell, but I'm sure you can put it in the bio or in the show notes. But yeah, LinkedIn or my website are usually the best ways to find me and explore more magic together.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I look forward to being able to do this again when we are working more on continuing to develop and evolve these transpersonal business frameworks in ways that are practical and impactful in our generation. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you for being a part of this, transpersonal tribe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited for everything that's going to unfold and what we're going to push for in the near future. Yes. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're thinking, who is this man talking?